Welcome back to Investing with Confidence. I am your host, Joshua David, having a good time with my good friend. And yes, we are great pals, Mr. Al Connickson. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and check out the Investing with Confidence YouTube show. Might even catch an outtake or two. So, Al, as we get into this next topic,
That's what I'm afraid of.
as we get into this next topic, it's retirement, and there's a pathway to retirement,
Right.
but unfortunately, there's a lot of trees hanging over and laying in that pathway for a lot of people.
Sure.
And that's just the reality of it. People have a tough time figuring out what that pathway is to retirement, but getting there with confidence and staying retired with that confidence. Now, you've helped a lot of people, I guess, start that pathway as far as what you need or what you may potentially need to get there comfortably. Now, it comes down to, first off, knowing what your retirements are, what they are doing, but also you need to know the rate of return that you need to get there.
Sure.
And most people don't understand how that's calculated. We're not going to get into how it's calculated here today, but what are some of the things that people can do? And here's a hint to potentially take more control of their retirement pathway.
Yeah. Well, the sad truth is that most people, when you look at what they have for retirement, what they're counting on is something that they know very little about. It used to be years ago, most people had a pension that they could count on. It was managed by somebody, and there's kind of a guaranteed payout when you're retired. Most people don't have those anymore. And to be honest with you, most of the pension plans that are out there are in deep trouble. They're underfunded significantly. Yep. But for most people, the pensions are gone. Social Security is still there. And the sad truth is that a high percentage of people in this country rely solely on Social Security to get through their retirement years. The other options that you have to help you get through, one is your savings, whatever you have in a 401k or 403b or a investment account, and the other is moving in with your kids. Probably not the best choice, at least as far as the kids are concerned. But the one thing you have control over, and you can take more control over, is that investment savings that you have. Most people just rely on an employer-sponsored plan. And to be honest with you, be honest with me, when you get home, take a piece of paper and write down what all of the holdings are in your retirement account, and why you have those particular holdings, how many changes you've made and why you've made changes. And most people would have a blank piece of paper. You're given a list of things to invest in, mutual funds primarily, maybe some ETFs, and now more and more are including stocks, but most of you are in mutual funds. Here's a list. You go ahead and you make a choice. If you want to make any changes, you make that change. So you're making the decisions within those accounts in most cases. One of the things that our students try to achieve as soon as they can is to set up a self-directed retirement account, something outside of the 401k or 403b that they take control over. Since you're already making the decisions, why not do it with some significant benefits? Those benefits are this. Number one, you eliminate fees. The fees that you are paying in your retirement accounts, it's like a bucket. If you have a big bucket and all your retirement money is going into that bucket, what if there's a hole in the bottom of the bucket and money is falling out? That's what the impact that fees have on your retirement accounts. And just a small fee, 2%, 3% can take hundreds of thousands of dollars away from what you could potentially have when you retire. So number one, ask yourself this. Are you going to retire? Can you retire? With what you have now and how that is progressing, can you retire? And when you do retire, can you stay retired? Those are two key points. One of the things that Josh mentioned earlier was rate of return. What rate of return on your investments do you need to get to the retirement that you want to achieve? It's going to vary from person to person, and there are calculators that you can use, but it's hard for them to take into consideration changes in life, physical health changes. Maybe one of a couple passes away or has serious medical conditions that you weren't counting on. Those are all things that could impact the rate of return you need, and you need to be flexible enough and knowledgeable enough to change things to achieve the right rate of return for you. Unfortunately, most people don't understand the right assets they can use, and they don't understand the negative impact of those fees.
Yeah, you kind of reminded me of something. You ever heard of that term, keeping up with the Joneses?
Sure.
keeping up with the Joneses is, people are copying other, or trying to one up somebody. Some, a neighbor buys a boat, so you got to go buy a boat. That's kind of what keeping up with the Joneses is. But in retirement accounts, unfortunately, that's kind of what happens there. I mean, so many people compare themselves to other people and they say, "Oh, well, I don't have much." Well, neither does so and so, and so I'm doing a little bit better than they are.
Sure.
So they try to compare themselves with someone that isn't quite in a spot where they're at, but understanding that they still don't have enough. And that's one of the problems is we compare ourselves and then we just don't have enough to get there. So you got to ask yourself, can you retire? Like Al's talking about, what do you have? And then what do you need to get there? It takes action. And that first action could be finding out what you actually have in your portfolio
Sure.
and then learning the skills to make better decisions. So Al, if somebody were to take control of their retirement, which would mean self-direct, are they stuck to buying mutual funds, kind of like what they're doing with a 401k or a sponsored plan? Or do you have the opportunity to utilize other assets, which may give better leverage, but also let them trade any time of day, so
Sure.
they dictate their schedule?
Well, there's a number of things that are advantageous to having your own self-directed account. Number one is you don't have to just invest in mutual funds. I mean, if that's what you want to do, you certainly can, but you have access to a lot of other things. You can trade the options market, you can trade the futures market, the foreign exchange market. Those assets give you the ability to have the potential to benefit in an up market and a down market, and with options, even in a sideways market. But it also eliminates the fees, so that takes one big hit away, or one covers up one hole in that retirement bucket. The assets that you were talking about, futures and forex, they trade 24 hours a day, so you don't have to just be available during the 6.5 hours the stock market is open. But one of the great advantages of those assets is the ability to maximize the value of small amounts of money. Because they have leverage, you can start with it's sort of like a down payment on a mortgage. You start with a down payment on a larger investment, so you have a smaller upfront cost. That investment, which controls a much larger total investment, that's maximizing the value of your money. So if you are in retirement, or you're heading towards retirement, you don't have to look at taking a large amount of that retirement money and using that to try to achieve that rate of return. You can take small amounts of it and use the leveraged assets, which allows you to participate maybe in some investments that you thought were out of reach to you financially. The institutions are using those assets because they believe and they know that there are benefits there that far exceed the benefits they can get from just investing in simple stocks.
Yeah, and just to clarify how that leverage works, as well as is the brokers, they don't take the money from you.
Correct.
They just require that in your account. So let's just say to buy one contract of the S&P 500, they require, let's just give an example of $1,500.
Mm-hmm.
That's just required in your account, and you can buy a contract. Well, let's just say you have 3,000. Well, you can do two contracts
Right.
then, but you can't do three. So they won't let you over leverage yourself. So
Right.
they just require that capital in your account. They don't take it out. It's not like you're paying anything. They just require that in your account. So if you want to learn more about how that leverage works, how self-directing actually works in retirement. So if you have, let's just say, an IRA and you wanted to roll it into a self-directed IRA, there may be potential ways to manage that yourself without those fees that the brokers typically will charge you.
Right.
But also, you're not stuck to just mutual funds, which can be devastating in retirements because of those fees.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot about, especially in this past segment here, about retirements, but we haven't really dissected fees and why
Mm-hmm.
they're so devastating, what they can potentially do to retirement accounts when you have fees. But what is the potential without fees, or maybe minimizing fees? So when we come up next, we're going to talk about fees, how to potentially minimize them, especially in retirement accounts.
Sure.
We'll be right back.